After the massive success of Toho's 1990s run with Godzilla, the company killed the giant monster off in order to pave the way for the next iteration the monster was scheduled to appear as, the 1998 Hollywood remake directed by Roland Emmerich right after Independence Day. That American movie was also being made around the time rival Japanese company Daiei was making their wildly popular Gamera trilogy, the final film of which happened to come out just 1 year later in 1999. But did you know that during this period in monster movie history, and even shortly after, there was a pitch to make the two monsters fight each other in what I can only describe as being one of the most insanely cool movie ideas we never got to see. What's going on, guys? Hope you're all doing well. Now, when it comes to the projects that have gone under the name Godzilla vs. Gamera, or Gamera vs. Godzilla, whatever you want to call it, this was actually not just some wild fan theory that had no legitimate backing to it at all. Unlike a lot of wild ideas that monster movie fans everywhere would love to see, the concept of these two specific monsters fighting each other was not only discussed internally within both Toho and Daiei, but they actually approached one another at different times in order to make it happen. During a press conference for Gamera Guardian of the Universe in 1995, author Masumi Kaneda described Daiei president Yasuyoshi Takuma mentioning this idea to pit Gamera against Godzilla from the Toho films. In fact, the reports are actually that Takuma went to Toho with the idea for a movie featuring both monsters, which would obviously have to be a joint production between Toho and Daiei, but after the man passed away in 2000, all those talks kind of fell through. It looks like Daiei wasn't really ready to commit to an idea like that, even though it would obviously have been a big hit. Because at the end of the day, both studios would have had to supply the money up front and then somehow split the box office between them. That's not ever really been commented on, by the way, but it's just common sense when it comes down to everything. So due to Godzilla dying in 1995 after the events of Godzilla vs. Destoroyah, and since these talks were happening that very same year, I guess the idea would have been for the resurrected Godzilla Jr. to have done battle with Gamera in a movie set after the events of Guardian of the Universe. You know, once the radiation from the older Godzilla falls onto the little one, he comes back to life, and so he's basically the new Godzilla fighting the new Gamera. That would be an early obvious idea that they could jump forward with if this movie were to ever be made. That being said, no legitimate information on a plot for the film has ever honestly surfaced. And keep in mind, this is all going on while Stan Winston and Jan de Bont are working on their very own version of the American movie, which ultimately turned into the Matthew Broderick film pretty much every one of you has seen. Interestingly, the late 1990s weren't the only time Godzilla vs. Gamera was being pitched, because even though Daiei were the ones to decline the collab after Takuma's death in 2000, plans to make the movie started popping up again after Daiei was purchased by the Katakawa Corporation in 2002. So in just 2 short years, the answer went from a solid no to a very big yes. Actually, we do want to make that movie now. The president of that company, Kazuo Kurai, announced that very same year that they were trying to make new projects based on older Daiei properties, one of which was a Godzilla vs. Gamera movie. Toho would be approached to make the movie, but this time they turned down the idea. By this time, they had not only made Godzilla 2000, but were deep into their Millenium series of films, none of which really had much of a continuity at all, save for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla and Godzilla Tokyo SOS. This pretty much led to the new company that bought Daiei to make Gamera the Brave in 2006, and Toho ended their newer Godzilla series with Final Wars in 2004, which I gotta say, that would have been the perfect movie to, at the very least, drop a cameo for Gamera in there somewhere. I mean, they don't even have to fight each other. He could have just shown up. It probably would have been super inexpensive, but
Money, 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 money.
Now, believe it or not, 20 years later, this project still gets brought up by fans, and in 2021, Shogo Tomiyama gave his own answer about why the movie being made is pretty much all but impossible. His words on the subject were, quote, "Perhaps Godzilla or tokusatsu fans would want to see it, but there would be no benefit for the filmmakers to make this movie," which pretty much confirms my whole common sense statement I made earlier. Look, guys, with 2 Japanese companies, these productions are always less less expensive than Hollywood movies because they make less money. And once you start talking about making Godzilla and Gamera in the same film and splitting the box office for them, you gotta understand that from the producer's standpoint, there's just not that much money to actually be made. I still think merchandise-wise it would be a really good idea, and who knows, maybe someday Toho and Daiei could merge. Very unlikely. I'm just trying to spitball some fun ideas here, but that's ultimately why we never got to see Gamera versus Godzilla. It had nothing to do with the fact that it was never talked about or the fans wouldn't love to see it. It really looks like it's from the standpoint of the producers making money on their assets. That being said, Gamera actually has shown up in a newer Godzilla project very recently, appearing as the new Netflix series version of himself in the mobile game Godzilla Battle Line in 2023. It's kind of a shame everyone thinks an actual movie featuring the two monsters may never happen though, because I'm pretty confident it would turn out to be one of the biggest events in history for this genre. And just to give my own little opinion on the subject matter, setting it in the same universe as the Heisei movies for both Gamera and Godzilla would have been the absolute best way to make a project like this a mega hit. When it comes to the idea of Toho and Daiei teaming up in the late 1990s to make Gamera vs. Godzilla, whether it had been 1996 or 97 or whenever, you have to understand that both series of Gamera and Godzilla movies were and still are massively popular with both fan bases. Sure, every once in a while you get people hating the 1990s Godzilla films from the Heisei era for using too much beam attacks, and it is true that Gamera kind of made consistently better sequels in the same period of time, but I really do think this kind of movie would have been super successful had it have been made. And the reason I say that is because the Godzilla series in the Heisei days and the Gamera series as well are just iconic in every way, shape, and form imaginable. Iconic movie villains, iconic designs for both Gamera and Godzilla, and the storylines were actually much more sci-fi and much more intriguing, and the special effects were actually way better than what we had already seen in the Showa era. But when it comes to Godzilla vs. Gamera, unfortunately, it never happened, and the idea of such a film is all but impossible, even from what the filmmakers have stated themselves. But hey guys, what do all of you think? What are your thoughts on the idea of a Gamera vs. Godzilla movie? Do you think it would have worked out, and what kind of movie do you think it would have turned out being? Toho really tried to make a ton of different Godzilla sequels in that short period of time, even trying to get King Kong back, believe it or not, so I can imagine that after dealing with that kind of headache from Universal's copyright team, they didn't even want to touch Gamera, despite it obviously being an easier product to get off the ground. But hey, whatever your own thoughts and opinions happen to be on the subject matter, I'd love to hear all about them in the comments down below. Let me tell you something, brother. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it, and if you'd like to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can be updated when I put out new videos. God bless you all. Christ is King. I hope you all enjoyed your time, and as always, take it easy.